Welcome to The Exchange, the program that introduces you to lots of interesting people. Throughout the season, we'll be exchanging many ideas on wide-ranging topics that affect all of us every day. I'm Rob Buckingham, and my co-host on The Exchange is my wife, Christie.
Hi, it's great to be here today. Looking forward to what the show has.
On today's show, we'll discuss whether there's been a decline in the respect society holds for people in authority, and are there consequences when respect is diminished? To examine this topic, we're delighted to be joined by Les Twentyman, who's been a youth worker on the streets of Melbourne for 35 years. Welcome, Les.
Thank you.
We're also very excited to be joined by Elida Brereton, who has had a long and illustrious career in education as a teacher, principal, mentor and consultant. Welcome, Elida. Great to have you.
Thank you. Delighted to be here.
Before we start our discussion, let's take a look at this.
When growing up, we'd play games like Cops and Robbers, the classic tale of good versus evil. As a child, we view the police as the good guys. They're to be respected and keep the law. Yet as we grow up, it seems that respect for authority has diminished, be it with the police, employers, teachers, or even our parents. What ripple effects does diminishing respect for authority have in our society?
That's the topic we're looking at today. And let's start with you, Les. You're the founder of the 20th Man Foundation. You've been working on the streets of Melbourne for 35 years, working a lot with youth. Have you seen a diminishing level of respect for authority?
Yeah, I have, and I think it's for many reasons. One actually is because of parents have stopped being parents in a lot of cases. They want to be their children's friend, and and they sort of, and that breaks down a lot of the structures of early learning about authority and also about respect. But also I think that particularly over the past 20 odd years, drugs have had a major effect on families, and particularly drug-affected parents, where young children don't end up going to school, particularly with the drug at the moment, ice, where people have issues around sleep. And I know of one young kid who hardly went to school in the first 2 years of their schooling life, and that puts that person very much at risk of not being able to maintain their education because of the fractured nature of it. And so that's one of the things. But also I think that as we've seen over the past couple of weeks about, I think the weekend front page was about a rogue policeman involved heavily in the drug scene. And we've had a few incidents of recent time where leaks have been given to bikie gangs, and that from people within the structures of the police force, and that also has an impact on people's
so people respect people less.
Authority, yeah. Absolutely.
And even there were some issues about police having beer holders and that with derogatory sort of slurs and slogans for various minority groups in Australia. So all those sort of things impact in some way.
Yeah. Very much so. What about you, Elida?
I'd agree with Les. I think a lot of the issue comes from parenting, and I think more and more parents, the baby booming parents, have abrogated their responsibility as parents, and as Les says, they want to be friends. They're scared to set boundaries. They're scared to say no to their children in many cases. I'm not talking about everyone. And I think it impacts in schools, which is my background, particularly when teachers once were respected highly, and if you went home from school and said I was in trouble, parents took the teacher's side usually, yeah. Exactly, and you might be punished doubly. But nowadays, of course, you'll have parents coming up to the school and challenging the right of the school to do anything.
So in effect, teachers' authority has actually been stripped, both culturally and professionally, and even legally.
Absolutely, in all of those three aspects, and I think it's very sad. Because in the end you lose that sort of business-like and happy relationship that you should have, where children are learning, teachers are teaching, and everybody's a winner.
Yep.
So it's
your background, of course, is in education for about 45 years.
Yes.
And also we need to mention this. Your claim to fame is as Miss Margaret Murray, the principal of Summer Heights High.
Yes, that was a tough school to be in.
I can imagine. That must have been an amazing experience for you, though.
It was actually. I got dragged screaming into it because they couldn't find... Christie wanted a principal actor who could act and ad-lib like a principal, and
Yes.
most of the 50 women who were auditioned couldn't, and naturally enough, they weren't principals. So in the end, he trusted someone like me, and I was, you know...
So you didn't have to act because you already were.
Well, that's true. My
Yeah.
friend said I wasn't acting at all.
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely. With your background in the media then, how much responsibility do you see the media has, or how much effect has the media had in eroding respect for authority?
I think that's a very good question, a very good point, because continually young people are seeing TV shows, programs, live programs, anything where people feel free to humiliate people, to swear if they like, to put down, to just be generally ill-disciplined in some ways, or even just being smart alecks with adults particularly. And I think all of that does untold harm, even if it's quite subtle in the way that it's perceived.
Yeah. Les, your
Well,
comment there? Media?
Yeah, the media. I had an incident that put me at risk of being seriously injured, and that was the Paxtons. I don't know if you recall a family of young people who were unemployed out in St Albans, and the Age did a story, and it was picked up by Current Affair, and it ran on 6 different occasions, even had the Prime Minister involved. And because I defended these kids simply because they weren't drug dealers, they weren't in these other sorts of criminal cartels, they just had long hair. The whole of Australia turned on that family and on those individuals. And with that, in me defending them, someone tried to glass me in a hotel, and another group of people wanted to bash me. And it was just lucky that it was in a hotel where a lot of my ex-footballers I coached happened to be on that particular night.
That's great.
Was able to
come to your aid.
Come to my aid.
Yeah.
But there's certainly and I think they actually used the Paxtons as a university media sort of clause so that people could see how. In fact, Ray Martin, who I get on quite well with, in his book, he said in his regrets, the only regret he had was the way they handled the Paxtons, and so the media do have a major impact on how young people perceive a whole range of things.
For sure. We need to go to a break very shortly. Just before we do, though, social media, and I know, Christie, you've just got involved in social media. We finally got Christie onto Facebook.
Yeah, I've finally conceded. But again, how do you think that affects people not respecting authority?
Oh, look, it's a massive problem. It's the biggest. I probably do about 100 schools a year, and I say to them, you may not have issues around homelessness, around gangs, or around kids carrying weapons, but every school has issues around cyberbullying. And it's, we've had 3 or 4 people have lost their lives because of cyberbullying. One had jumped off the Westgate Bridge, and another boy that was killed in a fight that started over dirty looks and got played out over a week on the mobile phone and then eventually on the computer, where his brother ended up being hacked to death with a sword. So it's a massive problem. And
because there actually is no authority governing the whole social media thing.
America seems to be a little bit further down the track. They've actually brought in some severe laws, and there was a group of 5 girls who were picking on a young girl who took her life, and they actually been charged. And we're just slowly, I think when the guy who was involved with the boy jumped off the bridge, he also was charged. I think he got a couple of 100 hours of community service. But just quickly on, when we're talking about teachers' authority, I addressed about 60 school vice principals recently about cyberbullying. And
Les, I'm going to have to stop you there. We need to go to a break, but we'd love to come back and explore this a little bit further in just a moment. You're watching The Exchange. That's great. Welcome back to The Exchange. We're having a lively discussion with Les Twentyman and Elida Brereton about the diminishing respect for authority.
Yeah, Les, before the break, you were talking about the fact that there hasn't been an authority in the cyber arena, but that's changing.
It is, and because of the severity of some of the attacks, where people are taking their own lives or are creating gangs to form to attack other people, and so the law is at the presently going to be a lot more sterner and things of that nature. Yeah.
I guess because technology is changing so fast, the law is struggling to keep up with some of these things, and maybe then as a society we're also struggling to stay up with how to manage what that looks like in a lack of authority.
Absolutely.
People.
I had a young boy recently who was suspended, a year 10 boy, and as the principal opened the door to let him out, he turned around and knocked the principal out cold.
Oh,
you know, I mean, that's the sort of thing that would never have happened in my day.
Unbelievable.
You know?
No.
So are teachers actually in fear because of this lack of respect? Do teachers live in fear of their lives as a general rule?
Well, we do read about the number of very, very young children who are now suspended from schools, and it blows you away that they're talking about needing a teacher aide to sit with some children and so on. Now, sometimes it's to do with ADHD or whatever, but other times it's just total lack of any moral compass, any sort of respect for people. And I think it starts at the home, I hate to say that.
Yeah.
And some schools have had really interesting challenges with parents. I was in one school where a student used a mobile phone totally inappropriately in class, was taping the teacher and mocking. And when the phone was confiscated, the father came up to the school and demanded that it be returned rather than the 24-hour confiscation. He demanded that the phone be back. Now,
And did they get the phone back?
no.
Oh, good.
No. And then
Well, that's good
he
to hear.
then accused me of being, you know, a little bit moody and unreasonable.
Some of this gets in line with some of the stuff you've been reading about this little emperor, little princess
Yes,
syndrome.
where children are like demigods, where you can't touch them. And apparently the stats are changing. It used to be years ago it was in the upper classes, more affluent, and now it's right across the board. What do you guys think about that?
Well, I think it's, again, that the society and that is breaking down because we don't work in it as a community as much as we used to in the early days. In the pre-TV days, you know, kids are out in the street kicking a footy and doing ball games, and so everyone knew each other and there was some sort of protection. But now everything's become so isolated and all going through social media that and so the kids don't have any sort of pecking orders or any structures around how to get along, and don't create any networks with other people. And I think that's part of the issue. You go to some schools, and I was at one school the other day, asked 200 year 10s how many were involved in out-of-school activities, and only 3 people put up their hand
Wow.
out of 200, you know.
Yep.
And one of the boys played footy and cricket. We worked out there was something like 1,200 people involved in his life. Teammates, opposition, supporters, parents and all that sort of stuff. They can help them get jobs and all that sort of stuff, but with a computer can't, and that's,
Yeah.
And I think in schools too, most schools, good schools, have a code of conduct and they have rights and responsibilities of students. And you often find that the students know all about their rights, but that other side, the responsibilities, is dim and ignored at times.
Well, you've heard from our experts. Let's see what the people on the street have to say.
Everyone likes to be respected, but is respect diminishing for authority? Today we're going to find out what the people think.
No, I think a lot of people have no respect today. They don't respect authority. They just think it's a joke and they do whatever they want.
I think the younger generation are a little bit, disrespectful.
Yes, I do. I think most people follow the rules. It's only really when people are upset or angry that they tend to break them.
Do you think your generation respects authority?
Not really, no.
And why do you think that is?
I'm not sure. I guess we think that we're kind of better than them or something. I'm not sure really.
I'm a teacher, and I find it depends on school as well. What kind of school you're going to. I got used to work for public school, and I think some kids certainly do have respect to teachers. Some are not at all.
These days, younger people don't always trust authority. I think it's just a different upbringing. Self-belief, being empowered. And older people respected authority because they were told to.
Oh, definitely diminishing, especially the young people.
Well, I suppose we had more respect. They have a little bit careless, too much electronic and too much things that they can watch in the media and just relate to that we didn't have.
People don't care. They don't look at the consequences of how other people feel and their feelings, things like that.
Well, some very interesting opinions there. Joining us now is the Exchange's Street Talk reporter, Sandra Cavallo. Welcome.
Hi, Rob. Hi, Christy.
Good to have you back here again.
Yeah, great to be here.
Some interesting thoughts and feedback, some generalisations too, don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I think overall there was a general consensus that the younger generation doesn't have respect for authority, and I find it actually interesting that some of those responses actually said that there's a mistrust of authority, and that that authority figures didn't actually demand respect, which I thought was really interesting.
Sure. Well, that comes back to something that you were talking about earlier, Les, that, you know, when authority figures don't live up to the integrity, character, etc., that should go with the authority that they have, then obviously we disrespect them.
We've just had the Royal Commission about abuse by the clergy, you know, in schools and that, and you know, that was such a sort of a culture that was just where they've abused their power for their sexual gratification and ruined young kids' lives. And so I can see where these young people are coming from.
Absolutely.
And even what Elida was saying in regard to parents wanting to be friends of the children. They can have lots of friends, but, you know, do you think that has diminished respect as well?
I think it has, and I think just going back to school a moment, that, and I suppose any authority figures, if the adult, I guess we're speaking in general terms here, deserves and earns the respect, they often will get it. So, I mean, as a teacher, I was always proud or happy that students were respectful enough of me because they understood I was genuine and I cared about them, and I wasn't pompous or anything like that, that I, you know, earned respect. And so there is still respect to be had. But as Les says, I mean, when people have been betrayed by adults, it makes it very hard, and people generalise from that.
Yeah. We have to be careful about generalising, don't we? It's like all young people are... you know, or whatever.
Yes, well, correct. I mean, it's not the case, obviously, for every family. I mean, it's how you're raised in the home that I would believe that then plays out in the school system. Exactly. You can't just blanketly say that, you know, all young people...
Well, I know lots of very respectful young people.
And they stand out, but they do stand out.
Yes. Yep. Absolutely. But I think it was interesting, though, that I think if there is a lack of respect for authority, whether there are consequences that are played out, and maybe that's where the losing respect comes into it, that if there isn't a consequence to that, then the kids know they get away with it.
Thanks so much for coming in today, Sandra.
Thank you.
We'll see you next time on The Exchange. Don't go away. We'll be back in just a moment. Welcome back to The Exchange, where our guest includes street outreach worker Les Twentyman and retired school principal Elida Brereton. They've been sharing their insights into the diminishing respect for authority today. It's such a huge topic, and who knows if there's a solution. What do you think, Elida?
I'd like to think there is a solution, because society needs to get along well. We need to have a diminution of the effects of lack of respect, which include vandalism and attacks on people and rudeness even, you know, every level of the spectrum. Yes. I think schools play a major role, I really do. And I think schools have to work in partnership with families, with parents.
So would you say it starts then with the parents?
It starts with the parents, there's no question of that.
Backed up by the school.
Exactly, backed up by the school. And I think that parents can be encouraged by schools, they can be encouraged by the media, anything you like to think about, where they're shown a better way. And the stories we have of children that have received no guidance from their parents and no encouragement to do the right thing and to be respectful indicate that a lot of parents just don't know. I don't think they're willful. They just don't know how to actually say no, or their responses if they're watching something on TV and some dreadful things happen to someone. If they don't display empathy and maybe respect for the victim, for example, then that's observed by the child.
And Les, if the parents are not available for whatever reason, well, what are our options?
Well, they can call on services such as ours, the youth workers who can work with the young person and the family to put some structures involved. Also, we do a lot of work where we try to channel young people particularly into team sports, where they learn structures around discipline and all that to play the game. But it does start at home. But some parents don't have the skills, and that's where they need the help of a youth worker. In fact, there's a program just been started here in Victoria where the police come across a young person between the ages of 10 and 17 that look like they're going off on the wrong tangent. They would then speak to the parents and then engage youth workers from the 50-odd youth workers that have been funded to work in that program. But it needs to be thrown, a hell of a lot more money and more youth workers, because the problems, we just built 5 jails out in the western suburbs and they're all full. And we need to work the
address
opposite
the
way.
cause,
Yep.
absolutely.
So you can find a youth worker through your local council, you get in touch with your local church, just finding a really good peer support group.
Absolutely, yep. They just have to go to the local municipality, look up human services, and if they don't have them themselves, they'll be able to say, well, the 20th Man Fund have youth workers in this area, or YSAS have youth workers in this area. So there's obviously some services there. It's just making yourself available of them.
Excellent. Les Twentyman, Elida Brereton, thank you so much for your time today and also your input for the exchange. We really appreciate it.
Great having you.
It's wonderful. Please go to our website for details on the work Les is doing with the 20th Man Fund and how you can help. And for more information about this show, The Exchange. We look forward to seeing you next time.